MotoGP is having its F1 moment. What happens next? Liberty Media bought F1 back in 2017, and all we need to do is look back at their playbook for F1 during that time period to see what's going to happen to MotoGP over the next few years. We're already seeing the impact of that as Liberty Media has announced the removal of Phillip Island, which is one of the most loved and most exciting races on the calendar, in favour of a street circuit in Adelaide. It definitely wasn't Dorna that made that decision to move from Phillip Island to the street circuit, considering MotoGP was held there for over 30 years. And this is the same company that replaced actual race circuits with street circuits all over the world in F1, including Miami and Las Vegas. There are a lot of unhappy traditional fans of F1 when Liberty Media purchased that program back in 2017 for about $8 billion. But what they did do was grow F1 to the huge phenomenon that it is today, especially using Drive to Survive as that big lever. So is Liberty Media taking over MotoGP the best thing or the worst thing to happen? I'm Tim from Along Trackside. Today, we're going to look at 3 important questions to ask and how they're going to affect the sport. Firstly, we're going to look at the F1 Playbook. What did they actually do when they purchased the sport back in the day, and what changes did they make? 2 is what moves have already been made for MotoGP and the impact that we're already seeing. And 3, which is maybe the most important and underthought of point, is why will MotoGP handle this differently than F1 will? So let's go back in time. 2017, Liberty Media purchased F1 for around $8 billion. And then in 2019, they dropped Drive to Survive on Netflix. It's a phenomenon, and it's based on the 2018 season. So essentially, the first season that they could film, they did. They start seeing revenue increase exponentially across the world. And then in another 2 years, in 2021, they add the Miami GP. It's an obvious push into the US market. They're going mainstream and there's revenue to be made. If we look back to 2023 when the Las Vegas GP is added, some people might have said, and they did, that F1 lost its soul and that racing had changed forever in F1. But on the other hand, audiences had more than tripled. Revenue had increased significantly. The average age of the viewer of F1 really decreased from a somewhat older audience to be very inclusive, very young audiences, a mix of male and female globally. So both things absolutely can be true. The sport is significantly larger and much more global, but it is very different from what it was. Now, secondly, what does it look like for MotoGP already now that Liberty Media have owned MotoGP since July of 2025? The first and most obvious difference and announcement that's been made is the removal of the MotoGP circuit in Phillip Island to be replaced with a street circuit in Adelaide. Street circuits have never been used in MotoGP. One of the main reasons for that is safety, because a long runoff area is needed when a rider crashes. The follow-on for that is the reduction in engine size next year. So going from 1000cc engines down to 850cc engines means that there should be less power, less acceleration overall. The racing will still be incredible, but it should make that street circuit in Adelaide much safer. And I think the scary thing for other racetracks or traditional circuits globally is who's next. There's already 22 races happening in MotoGP, so it's unlikely that we're going to be adding new street circuits, and it's more likely that existing circuits will be replaced potentially by other street circuits somewhere else in the world. Will it be Aragon? Will it be Valencia? Will it be somewhere else in Europe to go to an Asian city where they might be paying more? Or will we see more races in the US, which is really what's followed in F1? But the third and most important point is why MotoGP is going to handle this so much more differently than F1. F1 racing, although I love it, can be a procession at times. Whoever has the fastest car, which is generally from a manufacturer, will win qualifying to get pole position, and then they'll follow up that qualifying pole position with a win in the main race. So there's not that much drama sometimes of a race weekend, I find now that I much prefer sprint weekends because something can happen in a sprint race that's different to a full length race. And so Liberty's job was actually to make the racing more exciting, to bring more passion to that sport. And Drive to Survive really did that. Creating the drama behind the scenes made the racing more interesting and definitely grew the audience broadly across countries and genders and ages. The difference with MotoGP is that the racing is already so exciting. You can't improve on the fact that 6 or 7 people could win at any time, at any race, whether it be the sprint or full length. And what's so exciting is that satellite teams, which aren't the actual manufacturer, can be on the podium and fighting for wins. A classic example of that was last year with the Marquez brothers. Marc Marquez on the dominant Ducati was being regularly challenged by his brother Alex on a satellite Ducati from the Gresini team. And we also see that there's rises and falls in manufacturers. This does happen across both types of racing, but there's really not that big job that Liberty needs to do with MotoGP. It's already so exciting, so now the job is to get that to a much larger audience. For the F1 fans watching this, you already know the racing's better in MotoGP. There's more genuine race winners than at any time in F1. The field is always closer, there's nearly always an upset, and crashes, although we want people to be safe, are actually really exciting. For the MotoGP crowd, there is going to be a Drive to Survive coming. We've seen editions of that in the past which haven't been that good, but surely someone at Liberty Media has already signed that, and whether it's with Netflix or someone else, that will definitely be coming. So the real question ends up being, how big can it get? The racing's exciting, the drama's there, will the audience grow, and will as many people find MotoGP and fall in love as have with F1? And so where do things stand now? We're coming into round 4. It's going to be at Jerez at the end of April. Aprilia are the manufacturer to beat in 2026 with Bezzecchi leading the charge. But the Japanese manufacturers are still struggling. Honda and Yamaha are really not up to scratch. So we look forward to seeing when they will get a turnaround. And I'd love to hear in the comments what you actually think about this. Are you excited about the Liberty era, or you're worried about what comes next?